Lab 257 Part 05 by Michael C. Carroll. The disturbing story of the government's secret outbreaks. 3. 1967, the demise of the ducks. You see, we do have an impact. Plum Island. Assistant Director. West Nile virus and Lyme disease aren't the only suspicious germ outbreaks where Plum Island is concerned. There's also the demise of the Long Island duck industry. In 1873, New York merchants Ed McGraw and James Palmer imported white pekin ducks from China for American food consumption. The winding creeks, kettle hole ponds, and sandy soils of eastern Long Island were prime for duck farms. By the turn of the century, no less than 30 separate commercial flocks were raised on Long Island. At the industry's height, 8 million savory pekins were consumed in the United States annually, and Long Island produced 6.5 million of them. Pekin were reared on over 70 Long Island farms, picked at their necks with knives, plucked, packed 6 to a box, and stored in walk-in freezers to await shipment. Roasted, marinated Long Island duck recipes became a national fancy. The name endures to this day, but the Pekin ducks do not. The thriving Long Island duck industry was dealt a sudden fatal blow in the winter of 1967. Scores of white breeders from 3 months to 2 years old died on 3 adjacent farms. Other ducks were trembling, becoming listless, and unable to stand upright. Instead of gaily flapping and quacking, flocks quietly sat on the ground, wings outstretched and heads down, clinical signs of physical weakness and depression. Whatever the ailment, it was highly contagious. It soon killed off well over half the flocks. The USDA swept in and took charge, ordering some 6,000 ducks immediately poisoned and over 50,000 eggs destroyed, costing local duck farmers millions of dollars. The infection was found to be the virus that caused Dutch duck plague, also called duck virus enteritis, an avian disease endemic to Holland, Belgium, India, and China. It was the first outbreak of this foreign animal disease within the United States. 2 independent animal doctors who discovered the outbreak postulated how it occurred. The detection of the disease on the American continent invites some explanation as to origin. Had the disease been present for some time and remained undetected? Was the disease imported? Was it introduced indirectly by traffic in infected material? The possibility seems remote that the disease had been present on Long Island for any length of time. In the long history of the intensive duck industry on Long Island, the disease had been neither suspected nor reported. One farm employed Dutch farm workers and entertained Dutch tourists, but they were dubious of that connection. It is difficult or impossible to evaluate the importance of such traffic. They were at a loss to explain such an explosive virus infection. No evidence could be found that Plum Island scientists investigated the nearby site of the outbreak, or whether they investigated a possible link between the island laboratory and the outbreak. But the USDA pamphlet Duck virus enteritis, an Old World disease, in the New World maintained, in spite of careful investigations, the source of the original U.S. outbreak has not been determined. 3 years later, the USDA announced a complete eradication of the virus. The department showered the Long Island duck farmers with awards for the important role they played in the campaign. The Plum Island Virus Laboratory, coincidentally nearby, had developed a vaccine for the duck farms to protect against further incursion of this exotic virus. But the plaudits and awards rang terribly hollow. The farmers had essentially participated in 2 eradications, that of the duck virus and of their own livelihood. With the farmers' flocks crippled by Dutch duck plague virus, Suffolk County, under strong pressure from Hampton's area real estate interests, crushed the remaining farms. The majestic white ducks and their baby ducklings were now unwanted pests quacking and defecating in the ponds and creeks of the New Hampton's social set. Invoking protection of the environment, the government closed duck farms, family farms that for a century were the backbone of Long Island's East End economy. Prompt enforcement of control measures confined the outbreak to New York State, crowed the pithy USDA pamphlet. The USDA was wrong about its ballyhooed disease campaign results. A prescient article, buried deep within the New York Times on Christmas Eve 1967, hinted at what the future held: fatal virus found in wild ducks on Lee. The tiny news brief reported that 6 wild black ducks were found dead in Flanders Bay, at the head of Long Island's North and South Forks. A Department of the Interior official admitted the discovery posed a more dangerous problem than the duck farm outbreak. He was right. Wild waterfowl, whose travel is impossible to control, picked up the virus from the Long Island duck farms and spread it north and south along the North American flyway to geese, swans, blue-winged teals, and mallards. In 1970 and 1971, the virus infected birds throughout Pennsylvania and Maryland. By 1973, it reached the Lake Andes National Wildlife Refuge in faraway South Dakota, where 40,000 mallards and Canadian geese died and had to be collected, piled into a mammoth heap, and set ablaze. The infection reached the Gulf of Mexico and Canada by 1975. The virus continues to spread to this day. After the infection at the 3 farms, 2 local veterinarians brought bird carcasses and tissue specimens to Plum Island to confirm the infection by Dutch duck plague. Just as they had during the West Nile virus outbreak years later, Plum Island officials told reporters there was no possible way their laboratory caused this outbreak, because they did not study the virus until after the outbreak occurred. However, it was they who first conducted exhaustive laboratory tests and confirmed the outbreak was a foreign duck virus, so it's safe to say they had diagnostic agents to detect the virus and conceivably the virus itself in their stores. After all, they had to match the virus against something to make a positive identification. The results, said the Plum Island scientists of the new virus unleashed in their backyard, were particularly interesting. In that they point out that duck plague virus infection is, in most probability, a new infection on Long Island. It appears that the virus was introduced from outside areas to the Suffolk County duck farms. Could there have been a laboratory leak on the order of the government acknowledge a virus outbreak that occurred there a decade later? As early as 1970. Plum Island was again working on a strain of duck virus, and this one had infected a man suffering from infectious hepatitis virus. The implications, wrote the scientists of their research, offer some unpleasant possibilities, first as a mode of introducing a serious avian disease into this country, and second as a possible source of new human viruses by recombination between the duck virus and human influenza. Today, vast tract home developments and million-dollar Hamptons estates rise above the fields where 64 family-owned duck farms once proudly stood. Meanwhile, a few small duck farms on Long Island are left, eking out a meager existence. There are 2 reminders of the once grand Long Island duck industry: a 20-foot-tall concrete duck, built by a farmer in 1931 to sell his ducks and eggs on the roadside, that now sits guarding the entrance to a county park, and the Long Island Ducks, a minor league baseball team established in 2000, its untactful name highlighting an extinct part of New York State's heritage. It's hardly an exaggeration to say that 9 out of 10 Long Island Duck fans couldn't explain the origin of their team's name. Like West Nile fever and Lyme disease, Dutch duck plague is an emerging disease in the United States that continues to spread with no end in sight. And like the other 2, no one knows to this day how the duck virus entered into the United States and ravaged the duck farms of eastern Long Island. Speaking of the vaccine they prepared for the collapsed Long Island duck industry in 1975, too late to be of any help to the farmers, Plum Island Assistant Director Dr. John Graves said to a reporter, "You see, we do have an impact. 3 infectious germs, BB, West Nile virus, and duck enteritis virus, all foreign germs, have infiltrated the American landscape. All three emerged from the same geographic locus. All three occurred in the vicinity of a high-hazard, high-containment foreign germ laboratory with demonstrably faulty facilities and pitiable biological safety practices, flaws that caused proven germ outbreaks in the past, and infections among its employees. The public is asked to accept that none of these three outbreaks is connected to Plum Island. That's what one calls blind faith. As you read on, consider for yourself whether that assertion has merit. Lab 257 and Part 05 by Michael C. Carroll. The disturbing story of the government's secret.